This podcast that you get to step in today with the Fresh Inspiration Show is with Carolyn C.J. Jones. I think you're going to scrumptiously love it. She's a person that as soon as she talks, I feel like all of a sudden my guard goes down and I'm interested in what she has to say. So she's in the forgiveness area. As a forgiveness coach, being around her, I have learned so much about the things that I have done to the strategies I can use day in, day out for my relationships. She's also helped me recognize that my relationships are so important to me. So I hope you really enjoy listening to Carolyn C.J. Jones. Put a review down for us. Tell us what you think. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Fresh Inspiration Show with founder and host Rhonda Liebig, energy revitalizer and mindset freedom coach and #1 best-selling author. We are here to freshly inspire you, uplift you, and transform you with our unique mindset transformation entertainment show. Get ready as we kick it into high gear, arousing your motivation in lifestyle, vitality, and business. But before we walk through the threshold and start the Fresh Inspiration Show, take a deep breath. Check in. What is your level of belief in you to conquer this new world? And then do yourself a favor. Before you exit our show, ask yourself, what is your level of transformation? Because we know if you believe it, you can achieve it. And that's why the biggest, best, and boldest inspirers are here for you right now. Buckle up. Yeah, you've got this.
Fresh inspiration. Fresh inspiration. Fresh inspiration. Fresh inspiration.
At a Willie Nelson concert in a bar. When we had our first date, we went out looking for a half of a gram of cocaine. So that gives you an idea of our relationship, because that behavior just continued for 20 years. Well, not for all 20. The last 3, we moved from Colorado, where we had a 26-foot sailboat that we used to go stay on at a reservoir where we had our boat moored. And we decided that we wanted to sail the world, that we wanted to go cruising all around the world. So in like fashion for how we did things in life, which was buy ruined, fix it up, and sell it for a profit. So we bought a boat that was in ruins, and we fixed her up. We moved to Sausalito, where we found this boat. Fixed her up, and then the unthinkable happened. I met a fellow dockmate whom I fell in love with deeply, deeply. I knew this man was my soulmate. But what was I to do? I was married. I'll tell you what, I did not know what to do. I started getting up at 5 o'clock every morning and tiptoeing off the boat to run to the local coffee shop and sit down and journal for 2 hours about my feelings, about my marriage, about this other guy. And then I tiptoe back onto the boat. I didn't take it lightly that I had fallen in love with this man. Finally, what I decided in all my writing was that my marriage was done. And this other man was acting like a man who likes a woman. So I announced to my husband I was leaving, and I left. He actually kicked me off the boat. even though I offered to sleep in the main salon, the living room. So I went to our storage shed because I didn't have enough money for a hotel or a motel. And I stayed there for a couple days until he came and rescued me. And then I moved to a motel. The long and the short of it is I found out from the other guy that he didn't like me. He was just being kind to me, and I misinterpreted him, he said.
Carolyn.
Again, this huge rejection.
Hmm.
I was devastated, emotionally shattered. For 2 months, I drank and cried. I couldn't even feed myself. By this time, I was living on another boat, anchored out there by the marina where I used to live. That was odd. Anyway, one night I realized I was killing myself with my drinking. I knew I was driving myself to my death. So I went out to the back of the boat and I stood there and I raised my hands to the heavens and I cried, please God, who I didn't believe in, please God, if you're there, help me, I can't do this anymore. I went back in, crawled in bed and cried myself to sleep. Within 2 months, I found myself planning a road trip to get a handle on my drinking, to find myself. My first stop was San Diego, where I was going to stay for a couple of weeks with my former bartender. Well, I ended up staying 1.5 years and got sober. The first few months, few years actually, were very difficult for me because I was in utter grief over the unrequited love and I was in a rage over my childhood. But I kept putting one foot in front of the other and I kept going. At about 4 years sober, I discovered a way to forgive my past. I can't tell you how peaceful and freeing that was. Those feelings were immediate and immense. After all those years of resentment, I had release. And I'm going to tell you how that happened. One day, I was doing a self-appraisal. I was looking at the ways in which my behavior had led to the demise of the relationships I'd had with a few men in my life.
I love this, Carolyn. While you're taking your sip, I'm enjoying that you're sharing about the truth about all the stuff you got involved in with the drugs and the drinking and where you're going with being a coach that's really talking about this forgiveness. And so I'm excited to find out where this next layer is going. Thank you, my friend. Let's keep going.
Okay. So I'm doing this self-appraisal. And what I quickly realized was I used to get drunk and yell and scream at each of the guys I was with that they were worthless and would never amount to anything. Oh, I was horrified when I realized this. And the thing is, I didn't even mean it about them. I meant it about myself. This was a huge aha. Because realizing I didn't mean it about them, I meant it about myself, made me realize that it stood to reason and it was logical that all those years my father called me worthless and said I would never amount to anything. He didn't mean it about me. He meant it about himself. This was huge. It was life-changing for me because suddenly I saw him as a fellow human being who was wounded just like me. And believe me, I knew what that worthless wound felt like. It wasn't fun. So, because I felt badly for him because he was wounded and I could see that he was wounded, I had compassion for his wounds. And that transferred to my compassion to him as a person, as a fellow human being. After about a year of going back and forth between anger and compassion, one day I realized that forgiveness had found me. I believe that what happened was I created a space in my heart using compassion into which forgiveness flowed. And that allowed me to access that great peace and freedom that I'd found. So fast forward in time, I went traveling around in a van for 3 years, a van I gutted and rebuilt in cherrywood inside. That was the first major project I did by myself of that sort. You're going to think I'm crazy, but I'm going to show you that van is right there. Can you see it on the wall?
So I see it, Carolyn. So I see the inside, and it looks like, yeah, it looks like somebody lived there. Like that was your home.
That was my home.
Yeah. Did you enjoy that home? Is it something that brings
Oh,
some great memories?
it brings great memories, and just the fact that I was able to complete that project and it was beautiful. It made it sweet to live there. So I wrote a book, Opening the Gates of the Heart, A Journey of Healing, which is a compilation of photographs of gates I took and verses I wrote. Well, I was a publisher. I became a publisher to publish that book in 2010, and by 2012, I wasn't doing anything. There was a couple doing a seminar, a weekend event called Rejuvenate Your Practice. And I thought, my practice needs rejuvenating, so I went. Well, it was for holistic healers and coaches. As I sat there and listened to everyone, I realized, Carolyn, you have a message for the world. It's one of forgiveness. You can share with others how you learned to forgive, and they too can learn to forgive and access that great peace and freedom that's available to them. The rest is history. I started taking speaking courses and studying a lot about, even more about forgiveness and my recovery from my trauma. And I became a coach, and I actually discovered gratitude at 7 years sober, and this was the real game changer. And you know what? Recently I found out that gratitude is the sixth law of the law of gratitude. And that law says that gratitude forces forgiveness, meaning that when you can be grateful for things, everything, even the uncomfortable things, when you can be grateful for everything, you find forgiveness. So, armed with all this information, I started my coaching. And the best thing about it was I learned to be grateful for the unrequited love. After all, it pried me out of a totally dysfunctional marriage. It got me sober. It led me to forgiveness. It led me to the forgiveness work I do today. And it led me to be able to write this book, The Art of Forgiveness, A Promise of Peace. So that's my story of how I discovered forgiveness, kind of the overview of what I went through and where I am now. So every Friday, I do a forgiveness discussion on Zoom. You're all welcome to come, and we have lovely discussions, and I read some out of the book, and we then discuss those passages and the issues that were raised in that passage. Last week, I had one woman on. She was very fortunate because she got a mini coaching session.
I love that. Carolyn, I've been there too. I've been
Yes,
there, and
Rhonda's been.
yeah, and you reading your book along with your vocals and sharing stories and excerpts from your book, I feel like when I walk in the door, meaning the beginning of your going to share your book and do your reading, like, okay, I've done my work today. You know, I've been doing my meditation and all that. And by the time I'm done, I'm just carried even higher as I get to listen to the normalcy in my brain. And sometimes I go a little crazy too. And in the middle of the day at 12 o'clock, you get to have a break from the day-to-day stuff and be able to hear Carolyn speak. And for me, it really made my Friday even better because I knew I was kicking off a weekend and I got to share space with you and a lot of years experience you have with this. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you. I'd like to share with you guys, I'd like to pay forward information and experiences that I've learned, knowledge that I've learned, so that you too can reach that place of peace and freedom if you choose to forgive. So I'd like to share with you 3 practices that you can adopt that will help you to get to that place. So would you like to hear them?
Yes, and Carolyn, can I tell you, Seema Geary is here and she said powerful stories. So she was here listening to your story.
Thank you, Seema.
Thank you. Yes, I'm ready, Carolyn. Share.
Okay. I did a lot of reading, and one of the most beneficial authors I read was a guy by the name of Dr. Fred Luskin. He's a PhD psychologist at Stanford University who teaches forgiveness. He's also a worldwide renowned forgiveness expert. What I liked was he recommended, well, let me back up a minute. I got a lot of information and wisdom from Fred, and it helped me to design my Yippee method of healing. Now, the Yippee method, I named it that, so you can go, yippee, I'm gonna find peace, I'm gonna find freedom.
Here we go with the partying, Carolyn. This is our partying, huh? It's not the drinking now.
Right, right.
Can you get the yippee?
So peace stands, or Yippee stands for yearn, investigate, process, practice, evolve, and empower. I'd like to share a part of the yearn stage. The first part of the whole process in the yearn stage is developing awareness that you've got an issue. The next point is becoming willing to open your heart and willing to do whatever you need to do to get to the place of peace and freedom and letting go of your resentment. The next thing, which I want to discuss at length, is letting go. Learning to let go or surrender your resentment. There are 3 things I invite you to let go of that will help any relationship right now. The first one is letting go of the need to be right. How many of us have gotten into arguments because we had to be right? I've had many arguments because of that, and I wasn't willing to let down my pride and my ego. So when you let go of the need to be right, you can walk away from a situation knowing in your heart that what you had to say was truth based on fact or truth based on your heart. The next thing to let go of is the need to blame the offender. Now, you can blame the offender, or you can look at your role in the whole situation. Now, in these situations, our roles look like expectations. So when you let go of the need to control others and let go of your expectations, you can let go of blaming the offender, and you can look at your own feelings and take responsibility for them. The third thing is letting go of the need to control everything and everybody. When you're able to do that and just accept life as it comes to you, being grateful for everything that comes to you in the manner that it comes, you have so much freedom, and arguments in relationships decrease tenfold. It's really amazing. It's really amazing. So I invite you to try those 3 things.
Carolyn,
Yes.
I learned a lot in this area. So Jeff and I have been together for 22 years, and I know at the beginning of our relationship, I was really in that space of wanting to be right. And I found that if I was right, then my chest felt pumped up and I felt safe. Like because I feel like I wanted control of my atmosphere. And so if I was right, that means I got to one up and really show that I am being very diligent. Like this is what was going on in my mind. And when I lost because Jeff was right, then I wanted to pout. I mean, as a kid, I was known to be a pouter. So I'd go in that kid state and feel very scared. And I don't know if I could relate it then, but I mean, I know that all of a sudden my brain was very wanting to figure out how can I get him back? Like, how can I get, even, because right now he's already one up in me. And I realized that even translated to even like the housework or the yard work is that, well, I did more than you. So now you need to do something to prove to me, so there's always that one up game. And I typed in, because I want to make sure that we have this of what you're sharing, is once I was able to see that, because it can come back if I don't do my daily work, that I was able to understand that I wanted to control stuff. My brain just felt so much chaos. And if I thought that I was in this space to be able to be the leader, then nobody could hurt me. God, this is so wrapped around. I think that's why your 12 o'clock discussions with your book, it brings up so much, because I know I'll still have healing. I know if I live to be 80, that I will still be talking about it, but just in a different layer, because it's been in me, you know, from the beginning, at some point, wherever it began. So thank you for that. And community, please share how you're feeling about those. I bet it brings up stories. Carolyn, thank you for sharing those. Please go on, my
You're
friend.
welcome. There's one more thing to let go of that's very important, and that is the need to have your own way. Just think about arguments that may have caused in your life. It's taken me a long time to be able to let go of needing to have my own way. And it was a belief in and a deepening of a relationship with a higher power that allowed me to do that. So I'm pretty tight with spirit these days. I have parking gods, and I have traffic gods, and I have emotion gods, and I just have all sorts of gods that help me out throughout the day.
I love it, Carolyn.
So moving on, those are the things to let go of, and I really urge you to take a look at those in your life.
Yeah.
And now I want to talk about Fred Luskin's 3 points that he says what we're doing when we have a resentment. Because when you understand what you're doing when you have a resentment, then you can make correction. And the 3 things he believes that we do when we have a resentment are: we are taking the offense too personally, we are blaming the offender for our feelings, and we are telling our tale of woe over and over and over again to whomever will listen. And we hold people hostage, I used to anyway, with the story over and over and over again. Oh, poor me, don't you know? Well,
Can I speak to that for a moment too, Carolyn?
yes, yes.
And community, add in as much as you want. Yeah, I find this to be a really interesting conversation because I feel like there's consistent growth in all these areas. And the thing about resentment for me is when I get upset with a situation or somebody, I can remember when I was trying to pass the CPA exam and I wanted to keep telling people I felt like a victim. But I didn't tell them that, but I felt like a victim because I kept telling myself I wasn't smart. Like Rhonda, and so I take that into my testing while I was taking the exam. And so my resentment was, not being able to finish this exam, which I finally did. But I'd go, and I was waitressing at the time, and I would want to talk about it with everybody. So I would hold them hostage. And they'd be like, oh okay, I got to go take care of that table. Carolyn, you must have stories around that. It makes me laugh because I like to play in this space that is real serious and important stuff. I think the more that we bring light and fun into it, we can, like what you said, not take ourselves so seriously, because that's the hardest thing is I used to take myself very seriously. People would say, lighten up.
That's right. We need to look at ourselves in reality and with a little bit of levity. I'd like to go on and give you the solutions to those 3 things. The first one, taking things too personally, is to recognize that people are not thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves. They're thinking about how they come across. They're thinking about whatever. But 99.9% of the time, the offense was not personal on their part. They didn't mean to offend you. Let's look at blaming the offender instead of taking responsibility for your feelings. I was a master at this. I did this for 30 years. I was really good. It felt exciting to be good at something in my life. The problem is it made me miserable. I used to do things like I had unrealistic expectations, like when we moved to the foothills, about a half an hour drive from Denver, and he used to work as a mechanic in a shop, and I would expect him to be at home after work to spend the time with me all evening. That was pretty unrealistic of me. And it never happened, and so that was always a source of an argument. And then I had these unenforceable rules. And the same thing applies to this very same example. It was an unenforceable rule that I placed on him, that he should be home with me.
Mm-hmm.
But in those days, I didn't know how to fulfill myself. So I depended upon him. The third thing, and this is the most exciting, instead of telling your tale of woe, I invite you to sing your song of a hero. Now, how do you do that?
Yeah, Carolyn, what's your song? How do you do that? This is juicy stuff.
You sing the song of a hero by asking yourself and answering 3 questions. The first is about the situation over which you're resentful, or the person you're resentful for. Whatever the issue is, ask and answer these 3 questions. What is the lesson or the lessons I've learned from this situation? What is the lesson? What is the positive that has occurred because of this situation? What positive things have occurred in my life because of this? And finally, and here's the kicker, what about the situation can I be grateful for?
Ooh, that's a hard
Can I
one.
be grateful for? When you ask and answer these questions, you become inspired. And you inspire others to sing their song of a hero rather than continuing to tell their tale of woe. How cool is that?
I love it, my friend.
So those are the secrets to getting beyond the things we do when we have a resentment. And believe me, after I asked and answered those 3 questions about the unrequited love, because it works not just for resentment, those questions, they also work for grief, I found out. And so that's when I discovered the 5 things that were positives in my life and that are my gratitudes. The lesson I learned is to talk to people about feelings I'm having for them.
So,
And that was a big lesson I learned.
Carolyn, did you want to hold a little bit more space about lesson and then what lessons I've learned, the positive that occurred? What about the situation can I be grateful for? Like, that seems raw, and also it seems empowering. But in your, when you're teaching this, how do people work through that? And this, I don't mean it to be a big question, so I'm trying to narrow it down. But how do you get people to speak about this? Because if you're on the space of really beginning this area of forgiveness, I feel my arms, how it used to be, like, like stomping my feet, like, well, I don't see a lesson learned. That person did this. Well, I don't see the positive in it. I think I'm just gonna, and I used to like to abandon relationships And then what about the situation that I'm grateful for? Yeah, that I got rid of them. I mean, like, it doesn't get me into the space of the loveliness because I never gave myself forgiveness in that space and the situation. So how do you tiptoe or get in the back door for somebody to taste it a
We've
little bit?
established early on willingness, a willingness level to be open to everything presented and to consider it for yourself. So I remind people about that. And I know of the resistance. My gosh, I had a lot of resistance against this stuff. People would tell me to be grateful and I'd want to slap them, honestly. All I can say is this exercise shows up later down the road in the Yippie method so that you've had a chance to look at the resentment and process it a little bit first before we get to this. I invite you to keep these questions in the back of your mind over a resentment you may have and bring it up to consider. And over time, you may find that you're able to go to these places. We work a lot together. Part of the yearn stage is gratitude. After willingness comes letting go, then acceptance, then gratitude. So we've already dealt a lot with gratitude. And early on, I encourage people to do a gratitude journal, especially if they're having difficulty being grateful about things. And all that is every day writing down one thing you're grateful for and why. And so with that exercise, Rhonda, it helps get people more on the path to being able to accept those 3 questions I threw out, or those 3 points, and to answer those 3 questions.
I love it. Shannon Albertson Sunberg is here. She says, love the attitude of gratitude and seeing the positive in the situation. I know Shannon, I know Carolyn, you probably want to add, like how you feel about this great stuff that Shannon is loving on this. Shannon, I'm so happy you're here. I think it's one of those things we really have to, find out what our attitude is. And sometimes we can find it reflecting when others are looking at us, and sometimes it's in quiet times. Carolyn, what do you have to say to Shannon Albertson Sunberg?
Shannon, thank you for that acknowledgement of an attitude of gratitude. It's not easy because when you're hurting, and that's what's under resentment is hurt. When you're hurting, it's excruciating to listen to people being grateful. Excruciating. Again, it's a matter of time. And over time, if you do a gratitude journal, that begins the process of you being able to look at things with a grateful eye. I'm going to tell you honestly, I was 7 years sober when I discovered these questions and started looking at gratitude as my attitude. And I was 17 years sober, and I'm now 19, before it really clicked with me and my whole attitude changed 180 degrees to always have that attitude of gratitude. And now it's just part of who I am, but it took time to grow.
Yeah.
Just like with you, it takes time to grow.
I love the stories that you talked about. They were extreme. And so to be able to know that the things that you were dealing with, thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable. Now I get to, and the community gets to feel how big of a gap you can have into where you're speaking now as an expert in sharing that this Yippie method is a process, and you go from the beginning first and make sure that you work each step, because if you go in on the tail end of what the Yippie method is, your brain and your heart may not be ready for that yet. So there are some steps and strategies. Carolyn, is it okay if I bring in the experts now for them to share their process, what they were feeling as you were going through? Because I also want you, before we transition to Sabina Gork-Schroed, I want to make sure that people get to connect with you. So is there anything else that we want to say before we bring the experts in?
I'd like to quickly talk about an exercise you can do that's very empowering.
Okay.
And I'll explain why. It's called a self-appraisal. And I invite people to start with looking at their unkind, unloving, and maybe mean behavior that they've done to people in the last 2 days, and to write those things down. And this brings up all sorts of embarrassment and shame and bad feelings. And so, to deal with that, I invite you to look with curiosity. Allow embarrassment. Recognize that, oh my, I did do that, didn't I? And then look with curiosity. What was behind that? What was underneath that? What was my wound underneath my behavior? Because there's always a wound under bad behavior. Hurt people hurt others. Hurt people hurt the world. When hurting people start hurting, there's more to it that we need to examine. So anyway, this is very empowering, looking at this behavior, because you know that you can change it if you want to. And you make that choice. And that's incredibly empowering. And I finished the self-appraisal with this part of the exercise. I asked people to write down 3 kind and loving things that you've done for others in the past 2 days, and 3 kind and loving things you've done for yourself. Once you do this, and you look at the things that you've done for others and yourself, revel in what a good, kind, and loving person you are, and know that that is who you truly are at your core. You're not this unkind, unloving, possibly mean person. That's not really who you are. You're really this kind and loving person. And so allow yourself to be with that. And I just wanted to share that, Rhonda, because it's such a powerful exercise.
Oh, yeah. It helps me. Experts, unmute and give yourself space to be able to be in this symposium style discussion. It helps so that I don't judge myself. It helps so that I get to open up and realize where I truly am in the core space of everything's going to be okay, and not to be embarrassed. Not to be embarrassed by how I've showed up in a situation, so that I can keep moving forward. That's what I'm getting from this process as you're sharing it.
Yes, very much so.
Anybody else want to add in?
Rhonda, I'd like to add something. Thank you, Carolyn. I wish I would have known you years beforehand, maybe I would have had less of those arguments with my husband, being just mad at him, and would have spent the time loving him instead of arguing with him about stupid, silly things. So thank you, because this will give me an opportunity to keep this piece for my son, so I don't do the same things to him that I did to my husband at times, just getting angry at him for stupid things. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Donna. I really appreciate that. I'm glad it will be helpful for you.
It will be. Thank you.
I second Donna's comment there. I wish I had known that as a young woman too, especially in the early years of my marriage. I've learned this along the way. And I love your 3 questions. The what is the lesson, and what is in there to be grateful for. What I call it, what is the gift in there? Because when we can really take that distance to our own hurt and start looking at what makes me do these comments, these things, that I don't really want to be that way. And I can unearth the underlying reasons. That is such a huge shift, transformation, and it's an ongoing process. I literally had a little aha moment another day, because I still struggle with resentment when people put a lot of stuff on me and I kind of get overloaded, the boundary thing. And I realized where that started in my childhood as a little 3-4-year-old. And now I can really go back to that place and work with that little girl that got hurt by things posted on her that were too much, or she felt was too much. So, these are the moments where you just go, thank you. Those are the gifts in there, being able to connect who you were and why that happened. And you don't have to be that way anymore. So beautiful.
Right.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Right. Oh, thank you, Sabina. That's beautiful too, what you said.
I want to say that when you touched on how there's hurt underneath the feelings that you have, resentment and things like that there's you projecting your stuff onto somebody else because you're hurt. That really made the room to for compassion and to soften that, if you know what I mean, soften the space to let compassion in.
Yeah.
Because you realize that it's from a hurt place and you can really relate to that.
Can you?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, I'm glad that's comforting for you. I want to share some of the feelings that are underneath our resentment. So perhaps you can be on the lookout for them and deal with those issues. It's usually things like hurt, disappointment, shame, humiliation, worthlessness, fear, grief, loss, or the threat of loss. These are the common things underneath our resentment. And when we can take a look at those at the base, just as you're saying, that helps us get beyond.
Yes, it helps to question, and be curious, like you said. So you're not stuck in that space of being helpless and hurt and resentful.
Right.
It helps you to go beyond that place to question and be curious about.
I know, doesn't it feel like a lonely space?
Yeah.
Like being stuck there, I find that listening to Carolyn and understanding, I know that us experts have spent a lot of years in reading and studying, and that's what's brought us here. But we still have journeys to go. It's not something that you end with like ta-da. So I feel like I keep getting healing from it. And I know that our audience is connecting at, all different levels. This can be the beginning. And Carolyn, I know you're holding this space because you work with people that are at the beginning of understanding that it really is very empowering to know how to get in that space of forgiveness. Because I know I had a big ego. I wanted to be a man when I was younger. I thought men had it easier. And I kept carrying that with me, and it made me frustrated about men. And I did not have a good relationship then with them. And that falls into, forgiveness and forgiveness for myself for showing up like that, for not treating people well. And today, when you're bringing that up, there's more stories in my head of in the past, because we have so many things that we've done, at this point in our life already. So you allowed me to get in there and really listen to what I could be embarrassed about, or knowing this is the time to let that go. And I believe that you are one of the steps in my day today to keep me off of medicine, mindset, to be able to handle life. So thank you, my friend. How can people meet up with you more? How can people get into your book reading? Is there anywhere else you want to send them? You did some great stuff today. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you, Rhonda. Yeah, I'd love to hook up with you. Oh, did you have something, Susan?
What?
Did you want to say something?
No.
Oh, okay. Your square lit up, and I thought maybe you were wanting to say something.
I was clearing my throat.
Oh, okay. I see. Sensitive mic, those things are. I can be reached at carolyncjjones.com. It's my first and last name with my initials in the middle. Now, I'm in the middle of redoing my website, and it's going to be dynamite when we're done. You'll be able to go there to schedule yourself for coaching, or to hire me for speaking, or to buy my books. Until it's done, you can go to Amazon to get my books. Just type in my name, Carolyn C.J. Jones, and all my different books come up. To contact me, you can email me at carolyncjjones@yahoo.com. Or if you'd like to talk further, call me and we'll schedule something. And I'm at 415-686-0888. So thank you.
Carolyn, did you give them a way to get to your book reading on Friday?
No, I did not. Thank you very much. That, to get to my book reading, you need to register, and I'll take your name and email, and then in exchange, I'll give you the link to the Zoom.
Oh, yeah, and then, yeah.
To
Carolyn,
register, go to carolyncjjones.com/forgiveness discussion. All one word, forgiveness discussion. Oh, I'd love it if you guys came. I would love to see more people.